Yes, today. All right, so we are live. Let's see who we've got watching. All right. Um, okay, if you're here and you're watching, go ahead and put a comment over in the comment box. We might wait just a few seconds for someone to join, or in the chat box, rather. All right. We'll see if anyone else joins, and then we'll get started. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm here answering your questions about traditionalist Catholicism. If we have a little bit of downtime, I might talk a little bit about the previous sort of mini series that I did on some frustrations. But first up, we have Warren G. Harding's question. So we have Warren G. Harding on his question in the chat box. Do you have any issues letting go of your former traditional Catholic devotions? I know that Fatima, for instance, plays a huge role in the mind of many trads. Were things like that difficult to let go? So, short answer is hi. By the way, I can see some other people join the chat. So if you're watching, check in the chat comments, say hi. I'm answering Warren G. Harding's question right now about traditional Catholic devotions. Okay, so the one that I had the hardest time with was the Rosary. I'm not saying that all Orthodox will tell you that you shouldn't pray the Rosary, but that was a part and a pattern of my devotional life for most of my time as a Catholic. So switching from that to the prayer rope to the Jesus prayer, sort of changing up my devotions as far as that goes, that was a big deal for me. Not that, not that, of course, we Orthodox show any less devotion to the Theotokos or to the Blessed Virgin Mary, but it is different. And but I will say that as far as devotions to the Theotokos go, in my opinion, personally, Fatima doesn't hold a candle next to say the Akathist prayer or the supplicatory canon Paraklesis to the Theotokos. Both of these are extremely intense devotions to the Theotokos, and they're very explicit in their praise of her. So as far as I'm concerned, I sort of traded up. That's just my experience and my personal background. But yeah, that was the biggest one, was the Rosary, and switching from that to traditional Orthodox devotions. As far as Fatima, I always was sort of ambivalent about Fatima, especially because some of the fruits from Fatima tend to be extremism and rigorism and those sorts of things. So I sometimes questioned a lot of people who said that they were big into Fatima. I just personally, that was a big turn off for me. So I tried to focus on standard Catholic devotions, and when I became Orthodox, that was a little bit easier. So that was that was my relationship with Fatima. So I see, so we've got someone from Colombia. Hello, Conatus. I see Forja Tradicional. Welcome. If anyone else has any questions, do put them in the chat, and I will. Fatima made me Orthodox. Wow. Did you have any trouble getting out of the mortal venial sin distinction? That is a great question. Okay, so I think to answer this question, we have to talk about it. Again, I'm not going to sit here and like try to sort of teach orthodoxy. I actually have way more information about Catholicism, because that's what I was for way longer than I have been Orthodox. But I think it's worth noting, like, what is a mortal sin in Catholicism? It means that you have committed a sin that's cut you off from grace, and that means for certain that you're going to hell. And unless you go to confession or you make a perfect act of contrition with the intention of going to confession, then you're going to hell because of that one sin. You sort of kicked over the bucket and you're on your way. There isn't really anything like that in Orthodoxy. In Orthodoxy, it always seems to me, at least from my experience, like it's a gradation of seriousness. And there are extremely serious sins that, for example, keep you from going to communion, like adultery and heresy and these sorts of things. And then there are extremely serious sins that maybe don't keep you from communion, but nonetheless are a huge danger to your soul. So it always seems to me like the Catholic distinction between just mortal and venial is so legalistic. It sort of leaves you in a place where you're constantly trying to, okay, was that mortal or venial? And am I going to hell right now, or am I not? But, that's not the Orthodox perspective, at least as far as I've been told. So personally, I find that getting away from that and really thinking about what sins are holding me back has been helpful. I know that I still go to confession a lot. My wife would tell you that I go to confession way more than I should. I don't know that that's true or not. But I certainly think, confession is a great thing in the Orthodox Church. And so, working those things out with your priest. Okay, what things do I need to work on from a practical level in my relationship with God and in my life? I will say one thing that I watched on a video by Father Josiah Trenum on is sort of, how do we consider a sin serious or not? And he made the point that in some cases, a habitual sin in Orthodoxy may be more serious than a non-habitual sin. And if you're used to Catholic, right, theology, that doesn't make any sense, right? If it's habitual, then it might, in some way go from being mortal to being venial. But in Orthodoxy, a habitual sin, giving into one of those habitual sins, leads you more and more away from living a life of purity and a life of theosis with God. So it can be even more serious. So you see some Orthodox examinations of conscience that say, is this a habitual sin? And they take that, way more seriously. So I find that really helpful, because then I can think, okay, I really need to focus on these habitual sins, which maybe I wasn't as worried about as a Catholic. I just thought, okay, well, I did my usual habitual sin, and